Hey Earthers, welcome to iWizard. In this episode, I'll be reviewing Leviathan Wakes, which is book one of the Expanse series. And I am so excited to share my journey reading the Expanse with you because I absolutely love the Expanse television series. And I just thought, after watching the series through twice, I haven't watched season 6 yet, the most recent season, and I just wanted more Expanse. So I thought, all right, now that the Expanse book series is officially done, it's 9 books long, there are a couple of novellas as well, I am going to go ahead, read all of them, and review them here on iWizard. So today I'll be doing a mostly non-spoiler review, and I'll be lightly comparing Leviathan Wakes to the first season and a half of the Expanse television series because that's how they align, and discussing whether or not this is worth the read, and I definitely think it is, so stay tuned. Earth had been so focused on her own problems that she'd ignored her far-flung children, except when asking for her share of their labors. Mars had bent her entire population to the task of remaking the planet, changing its red face to green, trying to make a new Earth to end their reliance on the old, and the belt had become the slums of the solar system. Everyone too busy trying to survive to spend any time creating something new. Earth has always hated Mars, Holden said, like he was reporting that water was wet. When I was in the Navy, we ran projections for this. Battle plans if Earth and Mars ever really got into it. Earth loses. Unless they hit first, hit hard, and don't let up, Earth just plain loses. Mars is the colony, but they have all the best toys, and everyone knows it. Maybe no one who had lived with the certainty and support of a natural atmosphere would ever completely accept the power and fragility of a society based in doing what needed doing and becoming fast and flexible the way the OPA had, and becoming articulated. If Fred couldn't build himself a peace treaty, the OPA would never win against the discipline and unity of an interplanet navy. But they would also never lose. War without end. Well, what was history if not that? And how would having the stars change anything? Leviathan Wakes was published in 2011, and it was written by actually 2 authors. You may already know this. James S.A. Corey is Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank. And they are super talented and also, I think, maybe a bit lucky as well. This first book, this debut for the Expanse series, was nominated for both Hugo and Locus Awards in 2012, and then was adapted to a television series called The Expanse in 2015 on SyFy, and then it was later picked up by Amazon Prime. So that's only 4 years after the first book was published. And then in 2020, the entire series, The Expanse, won the Hugo Award for the best series. And both Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank have worked with George R.R. Martin in different capacities. So George R.R. Martin actually read some early drafts of this book, and he also was one of the first people to read the final version. And after he finished reading the final version, apparently he said this is the best book about vomit zombies he has ever read. So if vomit zombies are a major selling point for you, then maybe this is a good book for you to read. I personally think that Orbit missed out on a marketing opportunity. They definitely should have included best book about vomit zombies on here on the back cover. And so with that in mind, you probably have gotten the sense that there is a slight horror element, at least in this first book. And of course, this is science fiction. And I wouldn't call it hard science fiction. The authors don't get too bogged down in the science, but there's enough there to make the world feel believable. So it's kind of a moderate science fiction. It's space opera that still takes place at the moment in our own solar system. So it's set in the future, but not so far in the future where we're able to like either travel through wormholes or travel at light-hugging speeds or anything like that. We can't travel to the stars. And there was one technological advancement called the Epstein drive, which actually made it possible for humans to settle other bodies in our solar system. So the Epstein drive gave us the planets, but not yet the stars. And the Epstein drive is a modified fusion reactor. So at this point in the future, we finally, since it's always somewhere in the future, right, figured out how to extract energy at a net gain using nuclear fusion. And nuclear fusion, that's the type of fusion that is combining atoms. That's what takes place in stars. Okay, so using that nuclear fusion drive. And actually, to give you a sense about kind of how it's not super hard sci-fi, when the authors were asked in an interview, how does the Epstein drive work? Their answer was very well, efficiently. That's it. And I actually really like that response, that sometimes when science fiction writers with hard science fiction, when the authors are too bogged down in the science, it gets really distracting, especially if the science is off or dated. And personally, as a scientist, it really distracts me. And so there wasn't too much in this book that I found scientifically distracting. And I'll talk to you about that a little more later in my likes. And this story, this first book, is told from two primary points of view. And after having seen the television series first, that was really surprising to me. I was expecting actually more POVs, and I'll talk to you a little more about that later. But the major POVs we get are James Holden, who is an Earther. He's from Montana. And then also Josephus Miller, who is a Belter. And the thing is, at this point in the future, we learn that humans have colonized the moon, which in this book is called Luna, Mars, different asteroids in the belt. We've built stations on some of the moons to the outer planets. And there's really like three major nations. There's Earth, there's Mars, and there's the belt. And we've had humans living on Mars and the belt now for so long that humans have started to undergo divergent evolution. And so the Belters are actually, due to their low gravity, they're at like 1/3 G, and limited oxygen supply and water supply. They're actually very tall and very skinny. Earthers kind of are as we are. We are not super efficient with our oxygen because we have plenty of it. We have plenty of water. Martians are somewhere in the middle. And each nation kind of has its own specialty as far as resources are concerned. Martians have like this really strong, excellent military and fighting spirit. And the three major nations here are very tense politically. And Earth and Mars have pretty much been in a cold war with each other for some time. The Belters feel like they're so reliant on oxygen and water deliveries, and they just feel very much like they're not important or equal to Earthers or Martians. And so political tensions are very, very high at the start of the book. And any little thing can actually cause a full-blown war to break out. And when the novel opens, the first chapter is from Holden's perspective. And Holden was formerly in the United Nations Navy for Earth, but now he's working as an ice hauler on a ship called the Canterbury. And what these ice haulers do is they go harvest ice and they deliver it to various places in the solar system. His particular job right now is to go travel to the rings of Saturn, since that's rich in ice, mine the ice and deliver it to the belt. And people who work on ice haulers are kind of outcasts. They have maybe some backgrounds or some reason where they're not on like any of the main asteroids of the belt or living on Mars or Earth. They have kind of been cast out of society. So they're in a sense misfits, or they have these mysterious pasts that maybe they're running away from. And in this first chapter, the Canterbury receives an SOS message from a ship called the Scopuli. And Holden and four of the other crew members, Naomi, Amos, Alex, and Shed, go out to investigate the SOS. And while they are investigating the Scopuli, this camouflaged black ops, like unknown vessel, destroys the Cant. And so we're already starting out with this like huge surprise. And there are a lot of surprises along the way in the book. And if you haven't seen the series and you haven't read the books, I'm not going to ruin it for you, because I went through reading this book knowing most of the surprises, well, in this book, all the surprises from the first season and a half of The Expanse. And so it would have been like so fun to actually read those surprises, but I saw them, so that's okay, I guess. And then from Miller's perspective, well, he is a detective on series, and he's kind of like middle-aged. He's a bit washed up. He's recently divorced, and he has this case to investigate, which ends up being very important to him and the entire book. All right, so I don't want to get too much into the plot, but I'd like to talk a little bit about characters. And the Expanse show is just phenomenal. The characters are so well cast, and the actors just breathe this life and these unique personalities into the characters. And in part, I think that's because just the dialogue's really well written in the book as well. And I'm having a hard time separating the way the characters are presented in the book from the show, because I just see the actors in my head. I can hear their voices in the dialogue, and I think in part that's because they're actually really well crafted in the book. But I think there is this positive feedback going on where the book's really well written for the show, but the actors and the show itself actually make the characters in the book even more real and likable and better and more vivid. So they do help each other out, I think. But let's just quickly take a look at some of the characters and the casting. as James Holden, we have Stephen Strait, which was a pretty nice surprise because I remember Stephen Strait from The Covenant when I was a teenager, and I had a pretty big crush on him at the time. So it was actually really nice to see him as James Holden in this series. And James Holden, as I said earlier, is a Navy veteran from the UN. He was actually, I think, had a dishonorable discharge, which is how he probably ends up on the ice hauler. Holden is an idealist, and it's really actually entertaining to go back and forth between the Holden chapters and the Miller chapters, because Miller, who's played by Thomas Jane in the show, who just does a phenomenal job playing this noir detective character, and the Miller chapters are written in this noir style, which is really fun. Miller is a cynic. So we have this idealist in Holden and this cynic in Miller, and they have very much opposing philosophies, ethically speaking. Holden believes that everyone is intrinsically good. Miller believes kind of everyone's kind of out for their own agenda and they're going to do what's good for them. And so as far as the dissemination of information is concerned, Holden thinks that all information should just be disseminated freely to everyone, and that people are intrinsically good. They're going to make the right choices just as long as they have all the information they need. And what Holden does several times throughout the book is he kind of blasts out all this information that he learns, and sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad things happen. Okay, so it's pretty balanced. And then as far as Miller is concerned, well, he's like, he needs to kind of be the filter to that information. He doesn't think that people will do good things if they just had all the information available. And so Miller is kind of this like shoot first, ask questions later type of character, whereas Holden's like, all right, we need to bring this person in front of a big jury and figure out their side of the story. And so he and Miller already have these opposing philosophies, and later in the book their storylines do converge, and that is a point of contention. At one point, Holden's thinking about Miller and he's comparing him to an unpredictable dog. Like, you don't know if he's going to lick you or bite you. They do butt heads over a few different things that take place. Like, for example, Miller believes that this certain character is very much a worm tongue type and dangerous, and so he, based on his philosophy, that character should just be killed, whereas Holden's like, I think that person needs a fair trial. So you can see that combativeness there. So then we have Julie Mao, and you get Julie's point of view as well, because the prologue opens with Julie, and it opens with her taken as a prisoner and shoved into a locker on the Scopuli, which is the same ship that lured Holden and crew from the Canterbury with that SOS. Her story is very, very important to the story as a whole, but specifically Miller's storyline, because Miller is a detective. He is actually set with the case of Julie Mao's kidnapping. Okay, so he has to try to figure out what happened to Julie. And Julie is an Earther who is from a very wealthy family. She was raised on Luna, but she's very rebellious. And so she ran away to the Belt to have her own life, okay? Her own unique life from her family, and they were trying to get her back, but then she disappeared. And the other point of view that we get one more. So we have 4 point of views overall in Leviathan Wakes. At the prologue, we got Holden and Miller throughout. And then the epilogue is Colonel Frederick Lucius Johnson, who is also known as the Butcher of Anderson Station. There's actually a novella that came out just after Leviathan Wakes called The Butcher of Anderson Station. So you get that story there. He is the chief of operations at Tycho Station and a member of the OPA, which actually I missed in the TV show. I don't know how I missed this. I never realized that OPA stands for Outer Planet Alliance. Because in the show, OPA is given this anarchy symbol. So I just keep thinking, I never thought Alliance for some reason. And he actually was a UN, so United Nations Marine veteran. So after the Canterbury, that ice hauler is destroyed, there's a bunch of different things that happen. I'm not going to go into those in detail to ruin anything, but eventually Holden becomes captain of a ship called the Rocinante, which is named after Don Quixote's horse. And he ends up with these 3 other crew members who also came from that ice hauler. So we have Naomi Nagata, Amos Burton, and Alex Kamal. And they all are very different from each other. Naomi is a belter, and belters have these really unique ways of talking and hand gestures that I thought was really unique to the show, but it's done well in the book as well. So it was in the book first, because sometimes, the shows kind of take liberty on that stuff, but no, all of that was in the book. And she is this mysterious and bright engineer who can solve pretty much any problem. Holden finds her very attractive. She tells Holden on several occasions that she thinks he's pretty, or too pretty. And then we have Amos Burton, who's an earther. I believe he's from like the Baltimore or DC area. And he's a really unique character in that he's kind of this like beefcake with a potty mouth, but he's also a rocket scientist who's like a very competent mechanic. And then we have Alex Kamal. Alex is a Martian, and he's from a part of Mars that for some reason people from that part of Mars have this like weird like Western cowboy drawl, and he's also a veteran from the Martian Navy. He was a pilot, and he ends up being the pilot of the Rocinante. And while these characters all feel very different from each other and like they have their own personalities, in the first book, you don't get too much of their backstories. And based on stuff that happens in the TV series, I am assuming you get their backstories in greater depth in later books. So we will return to that in a future review when I do the rest of the books. Let's take a look at the big bad in this series. And so far there are a couple of them. First, of course, like in any space opera, is space itself. Space is unforgiving. Space is huge, expansive, cold, like 2 or 3 Kelvin. It's a vacuum, so no pressure, there's no oxygen. If anything goes wrong, you're done for, right? So there's that extra layer of suspense anytime you're out in space. The second big bad is not either good or bad. Okay, it's pretty neutral. But if you don't know anything about this series and you don't want to know anymore, you might want to earmuff this part. The second one is this alien, or it's not even an organism really. Okay, so it's called the protomolecule. And the protomolecule was discovered on Phoebe, which is one of the moons of Saturn. And the thing is, Phoebe was not formed from a planetesimal. So it was not naturally formed like 4.5 billion years ago along with the rest of our solar system. Okay, and it was not just this little hunk of something that was caught in Saturn's orbit. Well, technically it was a hunk of something that's caught in Saturn's orbit, but actually it's not naturally formed. Someone discovered that Phoebe was built by some kind of alien life form and sent to our solar system. and it was meant to hit Earth like something like 2.3 billion years ago, I think, like over 2 billion years ago. It's called the protomolecule, and this is so cool because it can actually modify carbon and silica structures. In geologic history, we wouldn't have had too much more than, we wouldn't have had advanced life like over 2 billion years ago. We think we were beyond single cell organisms at that point. But the point of this protomolecule is it serves as this blueprint. So like we're carbon-based life forms, this protomolecule would be able to modify us, our bodies. Silica, that's silicon with oxygen. Like, so different silicate minerals, like quartz is a silicate mineral. So it can alter these mineral structures, and silicon with 2 oxygens. That is actually really, really abundant in Earth's crust. So that's lots of material to work with. It's everywhere. And one of the things that I think is actually so awesome in the show that was not done in the book is protomolecule infects a body. You actually kind of see like these blue, like quartz-like crystals like coming out of the body, which totally makes sense if the protomolecule can modify silica structures. This protomolecule is an obligate anaerobe, which means that too much oxygen will kill it. So it's not like airborne or anything like that. It's not miasmic. So the protomolecule is kind of neither good nor bad. It was just designed for something. And in this book, we don't know what it's designed for, but we do know that it needs a critical amount of biomass in order to kind of learn what it needs to learn to serve its purpose. But there's a company called Protogen that ends up kind of discovering and taking over the protomolecule for their own purposes. So that kind of, they have some negative intentions. I'm going to go through with you some things that I liked about the book. Just some. And there are so many things I liked about the book. But some of the bigger things, well, one, this is a big book. But it's like 560 pages. But the thing is, it does not read so quickly, not like it's a big book. So each chapter is like 10 pages long on average. And so you alternate every other chapter between Holden and Miller. And so it's like always keeping you on your toes. There's always something exciting happening. Like the authors do stress and release and the timing of it so well. The plot is lean. And so it's very focused. And there's a lot of dialogue. So it's actually a quicker read than you would imagine for something so thick. Okay, so thinking about the two POVs, the two major POVs, Holden and Miller. So I found both of the storylines really entertaining. In the series, I actually really like Holden's character. But in the book, I actually liked Miller's character more. He felt like he had more of a deeper inner life to me. He felt more fleshed out. Maybe part of his deeper inner life was because he's kind of crazy or losing his mind at a certain point in the book. Well, I think he kind of does. I really liked his character. But with that said, I was never at any point thinking, oh, I just want to get through this chapter and make it to the next character. I did not feel that once. It moved along and was entertaining the entire time. And one of the things I like most about this book are the details that are included. All right, I've already mentioned the different dialects. So there's different unique cultures, of course, like even with different parts of the belt. Okay, so we have Ceres, which is even, so that's where Miller is a detective on Ceres, and actually to get Ceres up to 0.3 g, that's 1/3 gravity, they figured out how to spin the asteroid, and so you got this inertial mass that actually gets you up to that 1/3 g, and if you get too far away from the center of mass, you feel this Coriolis effect, so you kind of actually feel the spin, which I thought was pretty cool how you did that. And then we also have Eros, and Eros is like this giant casino, but it's an asteroid. So that's pretty cool as well. So the details I thought were really well done in the book. Like even in the first, I think it's the first Miller chapter, he's walking around Ceres, and there's a news ticker like near the tube station maybe. So this public terminal has these displays running, and right at the beginning you actually learn something that becomes important later in the book, because it says that communication problems plague Phoebe stations. Like, ooh, what's going on at Phoebe station? And then there's like some other things as well, something about no deal in Mars, belt, titanium contract, stuff like that. Like, so you get a little bit more of a richer sense of the world. Another thing I really liked is when you get this stress and release, you do get this calm sense of exploration with the characters. So for Holden in particular, Holden very much values his coffee. And it's kind of focusing on these little things to not lose your mind, and how important that is when you're out in space on a spaceship for like who knows how long. You don't know what's going to happen, or something terrible has just happened. He's just enjoying sipping his coffee or spending time with the crewmates. They try to make a nice meal together, even though the food is kind of ick because it's like faux food. They have like fake cheese, fake eggs, and they're trying to make something together out of it. And so I like that, like those relaxing explorations where you do get to know the characters a little better and the world a little better. And also I really like how James S.A. Corey describes how different activities are at various gravities. Okay, so like the fields of various G's. So like once again, Holden sipping his coffee, it's like, oh, it's doable at half a G, but that's kind of the limits. And then any time that they have to like step up the speed of the ship, if you're getting into multiple G's, like 4 G's or so or higher, you actually receive like this infusion of drug cocktails to keep you alert, to keep you from stroking out, to keep your body kind of alive, because your body really can't handle that much gravity, because with that much gravity you're actually getting like all this pressure on your body and on your organs, and it's actually really dangerous. So sticking back to the details, I thought the details were really great in this book. Is at one point Miller meets with Anderson Dawes from the OPA on Ceres, and Anderson Dawes is like sitting there actually reading a real book, and people have handhelds and everything like we do now, but that's all they have, and they're more advanced than our cell phones. And he's flipping through the pages of this book, and Miller's just thinking, wow, that is just so decadent. Like, think about all that weight just for like a single megabyte of data. And so I thought that was really kind of telling and creative. And I'm going to try to wrap up my likes very soon. So some of my likes had to deal with some of the scientific details around gravity, and also James S.A. Corey. They were very good at acknowledging that sound waves cannot propagate through the vacuum of space. And so you have your pressurized suits on, and when you're in a vacuum, all right, you can't hear anything coming through it, but you can hear from your radio within your suit. I thought that was really great. And also the way that movement is described, like floating into the engineering deck was like swimming into a cave, for example. And then lastly, the last thing I'm going to say, I promise, are just some nerd shout outs that I found throughout the book. Maybe they weren't intentional. I feel like this one was intentional, but one of them was. This one may or may not have been. Alex says 5x5 at some point, with someone asked how he is, and he says 5x5, which is what Faith, the vampire slayer, says in Buffy all the time. That is her tagline. So I think it was a shout out to Buffy. And then also, of course, Fear the Mind Killer was quoted from Dune by one of Julie Mao's journal entries in the book as well. To be perfectly transparent here, there was not a lot that I disliked about this book, but I think it was more in comparison to the TV series. Okay, so for example, while I mentioned that this book reads very quickly, there's a lot of dialogue, I thought there wasn't that much more to it than the TV series, really, besides a few different things. Like Miller's character, I felt like I got more out of that, quite a bit more. Some of the details about the society and the cultures, I got a little bit more in the book, of course. And about the protomolecule, there were some great conversations and more details in the book about that. But with that being said, Holden's character, I liked more in the TV series. In the book, I didn't feel like he got too much deeper than what we saw on the screen. And I was hoping for more. And maybe there will be more in the future with his character, because I found him very much likable, but a little superficial. And I know some people aren't very deep, but I wanted more depth to him. I really did. And another thing I didn't expect in the book, because Avasarala is such a big character from the get-go in the TV series, I was expecting her perspective from Earth to be in here too. And I looked ahead, of course, in the second book, and she is one of the POVs in the second book. So I really did miss Avasarala in this book in particular. And then the last thing is just very minor, to do with the science. And so when science is vague, I find it very easy to kind of go along with in science fiction. But when things are said that kind of make me stop like, I'm not too sure about that, it stalls me. And that only happened, honestly, a couple times in this book. And maybe it was due to a misunderstanding on my end, or maybe it's due to some futuristic scientific advancement that exists in this world. But one thing I noticed is at some point there's a mention of burning neutrons through someplace at sea, and I'm assuming at sea is the speed of light. And since neutrons have mass, I'm not too sure how that would work. So that was one. And then the other one, it just has to do with electromagnetic radiation, right? So we have oscillating electric and magnetic fields making electromagnetic waves, and that they propagate via the energy transfer mechanism of radiation through space. And there are just some parts of the book that kind of separated out infrared from electromagnetic, even though infrared is part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And then another part said something about a vacuum being able to protect them from an electromagnetic pulse. But an electromagnetic pulse can most definitely travel through a vacuum, and it is a form of radiation. So that was really it. Everything else I found totally believable, and that was just my own little tidbit things that I noticed. And because I feel like I'm going pretty long on this review, I'm just going to go very quickly through my ratings just based on what I already said. Okay, so the story was tight, gripping, lean, awesome story, really awesome story, awesome plotting, really effective use of stress and release. I say 10 out of 10 on story. For characters, so once again, Miller felt fully fleshed out. All the characters really had unique personalities and little tics, and I loved the different dialects and cultures that were built into this book. So characters, I'd say 8.5, only because I was a little let down with Holden's character, to be honest. And prose, I'd say it's solid 8 out of 10. Like, it's very clean. There's not really any extra fluff there. It's well written. I did want a little bit more at times. Some of the like later Miller chapters though, or some of the later chapters in the book, I just found like really well done and beautiful and nice and detailed. And I wish there was that level of detail more so throughout. I feel like it really kind of flourished at the end there. And also, and this is my problem because I knew it was coming, I always have a hard time trying to really rapidly get through books when I don't have that pull of like, what's going to happen when I kind of know what's going to happen. But like 2/3 of the way through, even though I knew it was coming, I felt fully gripped and I wanted more. And so that's saying something because I knew it was going to happen. And I felt like that the whole time, but I was always entertained, even though I knew it was coming, but I didn't have like that, I need to stay up all night to figure out what happens kind of sense, because I ruined it for myself already with the TV series. And for originality, I'm rating this a 9 out of 10 because like, while some of the ideas like kind of having like an alien life form, space exploration, yeah, of course, that's just space opera. It's been done. The way it's done and kind of how far into the future this is set, like before we're able to travel to the stars, I thought was pretty original. So I'd say overall, it's a 9 out of 10 for originality. Lastly, world building, I rated a 9.5 out of 10. And I thought the details in the world building were phenomenal, but I just wanted a little bit more. I wanted to live in the Expanse world a little more. I thought I'd get a lot more out of the book than the TV series, and I didn't feel like I got too much more out of this first book. But I'm sticking with it because I enjoyed this so much, and I'm looking forward to reading and reviewing the rest of the books in the series. Overall, that would be a 9 out of 10. So hopefully you stick with me on these reviews. And if you want to stay up to date on my reviews, which should be coming up pretty quickly now for these, please subscribe to iWizard. And until next time, bye.